Let's talk about Unity, because that's been a pretty fun roller coaster recently. Back in 2005, 3 indie developers based out of Denmark founded the game studio Over the Edge Entertainment and put out their very first game, the arcade puzzler Goo Ball for Mac OS X. There's nothing really remarkable about it. It's just a Super Monkey Ball knockoff, but it was downloaded tons of times, and it was one of the most popular games on the platform. However, this popularity didn't translate into commercial success for the company. Additionally, Over the Edge Entertainment had spent a significant amount of time building custom tools to make the game, since Mac OS X didn't really have anything for game development. Sensing a way to solve their financial problems, the company bundled its game dev tools into one application and sold it as the Unity game engine, the first modern game engine made specifically for Apple hardware. With the explosive success of the iPhone 2 years later, the Unity engine was perfectly poised to capitalize on the emerging market of smartphone games. Over the Edge Entertainment soon after changed their name to Unity Technologies. As Unity expanded beyond Apple's ecosystem, with versions for Android, consoles, and computers, it became the go-to choice for a lot of developers, especially if they lacked experience with game development. By 2012, over half of all mobile developers were using Unity to make their phone games, and Unity had hit 1 million registered users. By 2016, they had 5.5 million registered users. It basically became the next step up from the old RPG Maker applications of the early 2000s. That was just a very simplistic game dev engine, and the only thing you could make with it were basically just Dragon Quest ripoffs. A lot of 90s kids who wanted to make games tinkered around with RPG Maker, including myself. I have a lot of old, deep RPG Maker lore still stuffed in my head. And many of those kids who did become indie devs in their 20s moved on to Unity for its similar ease of use. Unity's first big gangbuster title was Pokemon Go in 2016, after which the company's valuation skyrocketed. They went through several rounds of venture capital funding. They started putting out asset libraries and software development kits and VR software in order to further streamline game development. They've been making big deals with Facebook and Google. They've been buying out other companies like Vivox, a voice chat provider. They've been massively expanding their business with new employees and branches. And while it is paying off, Unity did post revenue of over $500 million back in 2019. They have consistently operated at a loss every single year since their founding. In September of 2020, Unity Technologies went public with an estimated market value of $13.7 billion. The company continued on its growth spree, buying up smaller companies left and right, expanding into markets everywhere between 2020 and 2022, leading us to the current 2023 controversy. The story of Unity is one that seems pretty familiar to anybody who knows about the world of tech startups. A highly successful company offering an immensely popular product, but due to its own hubris and bloat, fails to achieve profitability even as they grow and become a household name. On September 12, 2023, Unity announced a change to their business model, adding new fees to their subscription plans and the addition of a runtime fee. They clarified that it is indeed a price increase, but also that most Unity members won't be affected by it, as most Unity users don't pay anything at all. The only developers who will be affected are those who have successful games and are generating revenues way above what Unity considers to be its threshold. The runtime fee install counter starts on January 1st, 2024. It is not retroactive, but they will charge the game developer once for every new install of a Unity game. Unity insists that they looked for ways to not do this, but it seems like their perpetual financial troubles have finally forced their hand. Here's the threshold table. Basically, if you don't meet these thresholds, you won't be charged. For Unity Personal and Unity Plus, you need $200,000 in revenue and 200,000 installs. For Unity Pro and Enterprise, it's $1 million and 1 million installs. I don't know if they intend for this to be that you have to hit both thresholds or just one. It's ambiguous. Once you're over the threshold though, Unity Personal and Unity Plus developers will be charged 20 cents for every install of their game, while Unity Pro and Unity Enterprise have a bunch of tiers for various install levels. Unity's confirmed that it's not every sale of a game, but every install of a game, meaning that hypothetically a customer could re-download the game on multiple computers, and the developer would be charged by Unity for every install. They literally made this 4chan meme real, where the company loses money for every install. Everybody realized that this was going to be a shit show pretty much right away, and after a massive public backlash, Unity came out with a second statement. They clarified that demos will mostly not trigger a fee, developers won't be on the hook for Game Pass downloads, and that they're rolling back that whole install scheme, saying that only the first install will count. If that's the case, why not just make it a cut of revenue from sales, dude? One thing I will say though, is that the public reaction to this whole mess got one critical thing wrong. Unity never said that the install fees would be retroactively applied, but everybody started acting like it would have. For example, this tweet went viral of an indie developer whose 2 games totaled $20 million in sales, and how he now apparently owes Unity over $5 million. Yeah, it's pretty funny, and it's a pretty good way to hitch your brand to the latest outrage train, but if the install fee only actually starts in 2024, this guy's fine. However, Unity is potentially stepping on the toes of some very big players in the gaming industry by doing this. Genshin Impact uses Unity, Blizzard's Hearthstone uses Unity, Nintendo's Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes use Unity. If these companies start getting charged for every install of their games, starting in 2024, you can bet there will be lawsuits. So, let's actually examine that whole multiple installs thing in depth. Here is the pro-Unity interpretation of events. The general manager of Unity Create, which is a subdivision of Unity, Mark Whitten, was interviewed about the controversy by Jason Wyman, a game developer who uses Unity. One of the questions Whitten was asked was which group of their users would be the most affected by the new pricing changes.
Before, the way that Unity Personal worked is you could use it up to $100,000 of revenue for your company. Now it's $200,000, so twice the size, so it's easier to use for more people, covers more cases, and it's more flexible. So that's number one. Not a part of the program, totally free, majority of our users, and a lot more flexibility. So the runtime fee applies if for people who are over both $1 million in sort of trailing 12 months revenue, money they've made over the last year on kind of an ongoing basis, and 1 million engagements with new users, essentially. And for those users, there are the following changes. The first one is, this is with next year's LTS, which would be, what is 2023 LTS shipping in 2024. So it doesn't impact any games that have currently shipped, and it doesn't impact the games people may have already been working on for a very, very long period of time. One of the most, I think, really key pieces of feedback we heard is that it was a really big business model change that people didn't expect. And so it's very clear to us that having it start on a future version where everybody can make the choice to use it is really, really important. The second that we heard along with that is that people need to know that they can rely on a set of terms when they start using a version of Unity. So we're going to make sure that that's the case. There are even some pieces about that, things like the GitHub repo that, by the way, I will just say prior to last week, I did not know existed. And now I know a lot about, and we're making sure, I think it's already back up there. It has all of them in there. Obviously, our website will always have our legal terms and terms of service and all of those sorts of things, but we're gonna make sure it's also on the GitHub so people can track that. And then the last that I would talk about is when you are using this future version of Unity, you have a game that's over the $1 million engagements, that there's a choice between either a 2.5% revenue share or measuring based on this calculated amount of initial user engagements that you can do. And if you do both of those, you'll always be billed the lesser of whatever that calculation is, but it's also up to you. If you only wanted to do one of them, leave the box blank, whatever. And again, that's only for those games that were over those thresholds.
So you give them the option.
One more minute. I forget. Sorry, one more minute. You asked me. And then the other key part on that one is it's self-reported. So it's both numbers being self-reported, both on the revenue side and on the user engagements.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think there are a couple questions about that we'll get into, but I think the self-reporting and the mix-up around there is a big one that I think people will be pretty happy with.
If Whitten's telling the truth, this sounds pretty good. The vast majority of users won't be affected at all. The next question was about how the multiple installs would be tracked, and Whitten replied that basically the whole thing is going to be on the honor system.
How will you track what version of Unity developers are using, or is that something you're even going to track?
You know what version of Unity that you're using, and we're going to make sure that you're clear, like what terms are associated with that particular version. This is actually, frankly, the same as actually Unity Personal. When we say that you can use Unity Personal up to $200,000, we're also not tracking that. We're just telling you that this is what the rights are associated with this version, so that and I think, and then obviously if we find out that you're doing it, we have a conversation, but
Yeah, so there's not like an extra tracking or anything added in, which I kind of assumed. I figured it would be just like the current setup where you use Unity free and then eventually you upgrade to Pro unless you don't like to follow the rules, and maybe if you get super huge or something, somebody at Unity might hit you up. But just to real quick clarify one more time for everybody on the counting of those, that's just you're going in, now make sure I understand this right. I'm just going into like Steam and saying, hey, I sold this many, subtracting my refunds from that and putting that in.
Refunds, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I expected.
Yeah, those type of things. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the goal is self-reported based on data that you easily have available, not sort of like I have to track some sort of user behavior that's, different than I've ever done or anything like that.
You don't have to go add in analytics or some tracking or anything. You just look at whatever your numbers are and then put those into the page. Yeah, that's kind of been what I expected from the start, but it was definitely, I'll be honest, it was very unclear because it said there was a proprietary algorithm in there. I feel like those two words made the thing drastically more confusing and led to a lot of speculation. Even for me, I was like, what? I don't know what that means. Like, what?
Yeah, you're right. And we want to be super clear that self-reporting, and by the way, on both the revenue side and on that is really key. It's why this program is very important, but we're trying to make sure that this is, easy for our game creators as well.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that seems like data that at least I've always had. If you sell games and have people download them, you've got the info on how many are downloading it or how much money you're making each month. So that seems relatively straightforward and a lot better than some built-in tracking spyware thing that I kept hearing about.
Yeah, and again, I'm sorry that I had to use the corporate jargon, but the truth is there's just a lot of different scenarios in games. And so some people might say, why isn't it sales? But sales doesn't work if it's a free-to-play game. And so we're just, we're trying to make sure that we can clearly define that in a way that works for a bunch of different ways that Unity's used.
This seems pretty above board too. Unity will require game developers to self-report their statistics on sales numbers and revenue and number of installs, all of which Steam's backend provides to the developer. Xbox's backend provides them. Most storefronts provide these numbers. This does mean there's a possibility that lying developers can inaccurately report their numbers. And Witten does say that if there's obvious huge discrepancies, like if a game with 10 million players reports to Unity 10,000 sales, they reserve the right to approach the game developer about it. But for the most part, they intend to just roll with self-reporting on revenue and installs. Witten also clarified what was meant by an install, and admits that Unity did a very bad job at explaining what they meant to do. That's an understatement.
Can you just explain the engagement thing one more time for everybody who's unsure on what that is too? Because I feel like it kind of ties in, like, is an engagement they got it on Xbox Game Pass or they downloaded it on Steam, or how does that work? Because I know there was a lot of stuff going on around installs and downloads and piracy and all that. I figure you've got the details.
Yeah, and I'm going to say sound like a little corporate-y here for a second while I use the words around it, but I'm just going to use them and then try to explain them a little bit. And that's, the goal is as simple as saying that it's a legitimate user of your software on a particular distribution channel. So, okay, what's a legitimate user? Well, a legitimate user would be an actual user, not your automated use, not whether there was piracy, not someone that had bought it and instantly refunded it, but like a legitimate first time that someone was engaging with your free-to-play game or your paid game. What's a distribution channel? Well, an app store is a distribution channel. So if that user went to a particular store and bought it or downloaded it or whatever, then you would start thinking of that as sort of doing it. Now, if they had multiple devices or they reinstalled it, you don't count those multiple times, right? Because I might have gotten the same thing in my library from a store that I can use on a couple of different devices. Great. That's one, not two. So there's a bunch more examples that are around that in the FAQ, and we're very committed to making sure that we give more details around that. But our intent is very simple, which is that the first time that your game with our runtime engages with a very legitimate user on a distribution channel, use that as a count. And then again, we think that many times that will be much less than this 2.5% revenue share, and so you could pay less or less through that, or you just go to the revenue share if you didn't want to track that.
Witten also went into detail on why they went with a fee for an install rather than a fee for a sale.
Why was there a whole install thing in the beginning anyway?
We think it's going to be cheaper for a lot of games. So, listen, we're trying to build a model that we think is fair and sort of, is a good sort of value exchange that works for games once they find a level of success. And we also want to tie it to sort of this value that Unity brings, which is, our runtime that's inside of the games themselves. And so it felt like a way where we could tie those two pieces together. And we think that in a pretty reasonable number of cases that's actually a smaller number, and we think that's good. Now, what we heard, got a lot of really, really good feedback, is that there were cases where people, first off, couldn't plan because they're like, well, I don't know, maybe something's going to go crazy, or I have this particular scenario and that doesn't work. And so adding in the 2.5% revenue share as an option, you can only use that, or where you have the both, and so you can always plan for it and hopefully do better, definitely was, frankly, my opinion, makes the plan better based on what we were trying to do. So it was really good feedback.
Yeah, I was, to be honest, I said this in my streams earlier that the idea of being forced on a rev share doesn't sound appealing to me, but I've come from the background of MMOs and $50, $60 AAA games where a small install fee, we're looking at less than 1% or a 1% fee. So I like the option of both, but yeah, I haven't understood the argument of just force a rev share. So hopefully that doesn't change and we stay with both options. I assume that's the plan.
No, that's absolutely the plan. The plan is that choice.
This actually sounds reasonable. Like, yeah, free-to-play games would have no game sales to take a cut of. Also, people who just own a ton of random Steam games from sales or Humble Bundles or something, but never actually play them, they won't trigger a fee either. By the way, I have a Humble Bundle affiliate link in the description. Make sure to use it to buy your games. Basically, I know that it's Witten's job to put his company's best foot forward. He's obviously not impartial here, but he did offer an apology and some decent reasons as to why Unity decided to change their payment structure. But there is a second possible reason, one that isn't quite so above board. Remember when I mentioned that Unity was gobbling up companies left and right? Well, their expansion led them to buy out ironSource back in July of 2022. It's a bit tricky to figure out what ironSource actually does. Their Wikipedia page lists them as a mobile games company, but they don't seem to have put out any games. Their website says, "One platform to turn your app into a business. Our platform lets you focus on what you do best, creating great apps and user experiences, while we take care of the rest. Get the ironSource SDK to start monetizing your app and acquiring quality users." SDK just stands for Software Development Kit. Basically, it's a set of tools you can use to make a program. So, alright, they sell tools that developers use to make games, just like Unity. ironSource used to sell their tools back in 2011 under the name InstallCore, and InstallCore has a sordid history. Various antivirus and anti-malware applications began to label InstallCore as malware starting in 2014. InstallCore was an application that allowed those using it to include monetization in their programs through advertising, as well as making it possible to charge companies per installation through install tracking. It could also add toolbars to your internet browser that were difficult to remove, record your computer's processes, and send that data back home. And it was also the main reason that when you went to install a legitimate application, you often found that a whole bunch of other garbage got installed along with it. InstallCore became one of the most infamous bits of malware of the 2010s. InstallCore was phased out in 2020, having been replaced with the ironCore SDK, which is basically just more of the same. In fact, whenever you're on the Pirate Bay or some other torrent site or downloading site, and you see a banner ad claiming to lead you to a Google Chrome install, but actually goes to some malware URL, that's generally ironCore's work. If you were to click on one of those obvious links, ironCore would install a toolbar into your browser that would display ads to you, track your internet usage, and lag the fuck out of your PC. Unity completed their buyout of ironSource in November of 2022. As part of the deal, ironSource's CEO joined the Unity board of directors. A few months later, the Unity board began the discussion of how to further monetize Unity and eventually came up with the idea of a per-install fee. It's not too much of a stretch to say that Unity, having just acquired a company that specialized in tracking malware, might put that software to use in the tracking of their users. Right now, everybody's blaming Unity's now ex-CEO, John Riccitiello, for this whole shit show. There's a pretty convincing story for that interpretation of events. Riccitiello was previously the CEO at EA, a gaming company that everyone's loved to hate for about, 30 years now. He was brought into Unity back in 2014 and began to push for the company's aggressive expansion. During an interview, Riccitiello explained his logic behind Unity acquiring ironSource.
We've long thought that ironSource was an amazing company, and when I started to get to know Tomer a bit better, one thing that Tomer, the CEO over at ironSource, we realized we shared a common vision. And with Unity, most of the world's game content is built on Unity. We've also got a really strong monetization network. And what we're trying to get to, over the course of, many years, is the platform where a creator can make the best content and monetize their best content. And sometimes monetization is harder than it is to build the great game. And if you don't have a great business to go with a great game, you don't have a great game because you don't have the resources to make it. And so here, what this is about is they have some tools that are pretty amazing that if you add them to our stack, we can get to a place where a creator can get user feedback on pieces of the game along the way. So they know how the game or the digital twin or whatever the real-time 3D content is made to be. And they get feedback on user engagement and what's working, not working, and also simultaneously get feedback on, what it takes to acquire a user. So the outgrowth of a unified creation and growth platform that we could put together is really better content and a better business in a way that we think is really magical for creators.
While I'm sure there's certainly some very positive uses for ironSource's tracking tools, he does make a good case for them. It's also very easy to see how it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Riccitiello went into more detail on the data front, specifically saying more data is good.
So the narrative is pretty simple. Risk's vision around making for better content and better businesses. When our customers do better, we do better. Secondly, 3 very strong synergies. Those synergies are around more data is better. And a diversity of data means we're not dependent on any one data source. And so they've got a lot of different data sources, and so do we. It's a large number. I can list them if you want. The second is they've got a leading mediation tool, which is an important part of a full stack monetization platform. We will bring more data, more demand to that platform, and that's helpful to both companies. And again, customers win, we win. And third, they've got a set of publishing tools that they call Supersonic. And it's a great solution for the long tail. Virtually everybody on the long tail makes their games on Unity. This is one of those peanut butter and chocolate mixes where we've got the customer that they need, they've got the solution we need, and we see strong synergy in that.
When Unity went public back in September of 2020, a few choice groups bought up a significant amount of their stock. A lot of people who follow stock ownership conspiracies will likely recognize some of these names. Sequoia Capital, Silver Lake Management, the Vanguard Group. ironSource was even praised by the World Economic Forum as one of their preferred global growth companies. Okay, I'm not going to be diving into the Klaus Schwab rabbit hole today. I'm not prepared for it right now. And frankly, I don't think I believe a lot of it. I'm bringing this up because the CEO of a public company serves at the pleasure of the shareholder board. Even if Riccitiello disagreed with the ironSource merger, and he probably didn't, he wasn't in a position to actually reject it, considering that Silver Lake and Sequoia announced an additional $1 billion of investment into the company if they took the deal. Riccitiello sold 2,000 Unity shares 6 days before the pricing announcement. He's been selling shares of Unity all year. Other executives at Unity have been doing the same. I think people at Unity have a feeling that things are starting to go belly up, despite their public statements otherwise. And now that Unity's had a spectacular PR blowout, Riccitiello has probably decided that now is the time for him to step down. What's likely is that he saw the writing on the wall, cashed out, and abandoned the sinking ship. He might have been the accidental orchestrator of this disaster and decided to cut his losses and leave. He might have objected to the merger and been overruled by the owners of Unity, and now he's taken off before things really go tits up. Either way, he's gone, and the internet has certainly decided to blame him for everything. By the way, I personally believe that the ironSource malware tracking story is probably more likely than the Mark-written everything is totally cool story, because Unity announced that it will quietly waive all of those fees if game developers switch to their in-game ad monetization service, another bit of software that came along with the ironSource acquisition. Oh, also because of that $1 billion invested from Sequoia and Silver Lake to make that ironSource deal go down smoothly, a chunk of it probably went towards executive compensation packages. $45 million over 3 years for Riccitiello, and $47 million over 2 years to Written, not to mention the other executives. Neil Long, reporting for the website Mobile Gamer, was contacted by sources within Unity about the whole fiasco. They are anonymous sources, presumably because they don't want to lose their jobs, so take this with a grain of salt. This was published only a few days ago on October 23rd, and it seems to be the most recent news in the story. I would wager a guess that now that the initial controversy has blown over, these guys felt more comfortable talking to the press. A major mobile game publisher and one of Unity's biggest clients met with John Riccitiello himself after the first runtime fee policy was announced. They directly told him, "Fuck you, we're not paying." Unity planned to announce a 4% revenue share for games that earned over $1 million, slightly undercutting Unreal Engine's 5%. But the response was so fierce, it was knocked down to 2.5% in the second tweaked policy, announced a week and a half later. Before the original runtime fee announcement was made, a very large group of senior Unity managers met to discuss the proposed changes. Half of the people in that meeting said that the model was too complicated. It wasn't going to be well received and that they should talk to other people before they do it. Apparently, Unity had spoken to people, but they didn't say who it was. The whole thing felt very rushed. They had a meeting and they were told that it was happening, but they weren't told a date, and then it was suddenly out there. This actually sounds a lot like something that Mark Whitten said in that interview from earlier.
There's a lot of questions, so I want to go on to the next one, which reads kind of meanly, so I'm going to read it really mean too. So, did you even bother to talk to customers before you rolled out your version from last week? No, did you guys talk to customers? Can you talk a little bit about that?
We did. We talked to partners, large customers, small customers, lots of internal people. We didn't listen to enough of their feedback. Just want to be clear. We should have listened to more of their feedback. And we need to do better. And I could tell you, as an example, on Sunday, I think, it's been a long week, so the days merge together a little bit, but on Sunday, I think we put up on X a kind of a statement saying that we'll get back to you in a couple of days. The reason we didn't get back to you in a couple of days is because as we were working through the plan, we were going back and talking to big customers, independent developers, partners, over and over again to get that feedback. Because I think the most fundamental thing about talking to customers is it's kind of an ongoing iterative conversation, and we didn't do that well enough. And now I'm very, very convicted on this policy that we're doing that.
The source also said that the company AppLovin is dominating, and Unity tried to use this policy as a forcing agent to try and get back some market share. It was ironSource and Unity's play to increase their mediation business, and developers have been caught in the crossfire of this mediation war that's been going on for a couple of years now. Here's the deep lore on that. ironSource has a competitor in the advertisements in apps space called AppLovin. AppLovin is a larger company without the reputation of spreading malware around, and when Unity announced their desire to merge with ironSource in 2022, AppLovin, seeing their competitor merge with a major player, decided to counter-offer. They would buy Unity instead, and offered up $17 billion for the deal. Unity ultimately rejected them, sticking with their ironSource acquisition instead, which cost them around $4.4 billion to complete. Neil Long reported previously on the AppLovin story back in September, where multiple game development studios using Unity admitted that Unity quietly offered to waive the runtime fee if they switched away from AppLovin and used their in-app advertisement tools instead. One developer specifically speculated that ironSource has wanted to kill AppLovin for a long time, and now Unity, as ironSource's owner and with ironSource executives on their board, have continued that goal. AppLovin's been dominating this specific market, offering what developers claim is a superior product to ironSource's. And ironSource's game plan has been to integrate themselves vertically to control access to other pieces of the market chain, rather than develop their own superior product. The developers have also stated that this move has come from the ironSource side of the merged business, not the Unity side, and that while large companies can simply pay the fee, small developers have no choice but to accept Unity's in-app advertisement tools in order to save their projects. Going back to the October article, the anonymous sources inside Unity confirmed that Neil Long's reporting and the developer assertions from the September article were actually accurate. A second large mobile publisher, who also refused to switch from AppLovin to ironSource, was told by the company that that was the last time you could have got that money, and that in the future, presumably when the terms of service changed again, they will be forced to use ironSource, and that ironSource's intention is to completely wipe AppLovin out. Nonetheless, the source at Unity doesn't believe this was done maliciously. Unity has lost a lot of money over the last 18 years, billions of dollars, and they need to do something to make money. Sadly, this wasn't delivered well, but the need to make more money is still there. Again, this is very similar to something Whitten said earlier.
Why did you go about doing this whole thing, the pricing plan change, putting this up, posting it out there, making a lot of people angry, of course, and then rolling it back a week later? Like, what was the point of doing all that if you're going to kind of do this rollback afterwards?
Well, the most fundamental thing that we're trying to do is we're building a sustainable business for Unity. And for us, that means that we do need to have a model that includes some sort of balanced exchange, including shared success. That's really, really important for the long-term future of how we think about our business, how we think about the engine. And the main reason is really clear. It has to be a sustainable business. We want to keep massively and deeply investing in the engine. We want to make sure that we can build the best editor and runtime for everyone to build the games today and tomorrow. And that's the reason why we're working on it. I'm very, very focused on that. It's very important for Unity.
According to like your internal projections, is this going to be enough to just keep things stable, or do you feel like you're going to need to reevaluate in another year or two?
Listen, when we make a shift that says that it doesn't start until next year, obviously that means that games that are participating in the runtime fee are going to come later. So there's a shift on sort of where some of that comes, but this is about a business model transition. This isn't about, hey, we need to do something for the next 3 months or something like that. This is about setting up the foundation of the company. This program is critical for us for the foundation of the company to be able to continue to invest for a very, very long period of time. So if the shape kind of is like this, like a little shape that goes like this versus being earlier, that's less relevant than making sure that we have a right program that works for our creators. That's why I believe that this is a better program, because I think we got great feedback to make it a better program and works for Unity.
It's not just Risatello who's decided to abandon the Unity sinking ship. The source mentioned that many people have begun to apply elsewhere in the games industry. The writing's on the wall. Unity stock was at $200 in November of 2021, well before the ironSource merger, while it's now sitting at around $26. What makes this really funny is that Unity's stock price has collapsed so much since this shit show began that AppLovin can actually afford to just buy them outright again, which they are currently considering. But it turns out, despite Witten's remarks about the thresholds and whatever else in that interview, the people who will actually be affected by the changes at Unity are the middle-of-the-road creators. The Unity source remarked that a lot of the outcry from indie devs was misplaced, as none of them will ever get anywhere near the $1 million threshold anyway. That rules out the indie underclass. Meanwhile, anyone in a bigger developer's business team or sales team is going to be able to reduce those fees. Some big clients might leave. Other big clients might keep using Unity and simply pay a fee to avoid switching over to AppLovin. That rules out the big names. The only ones who are going to start seeing serious money losses are the successful indies, who are nonetheless still small companies, like the Hollow Knights and the Shovel Knights and the Undertales of the world. It's these people who will feel the pinch from Unity. So, that brings us to the end. Is it possible that Unity was actually going okay, not great, but okay, until deciding to buy ironSource, a plague blanket of a company, a deal which the executives were incentivized to take due to a fat stack of cash provided to them by their investors, which explains why they rejected the AppLovin counteroffer, a deal which left Unity on the hook for a huge bill, as well as ownership of a bunch of tracking software that they had to somehow monetize, leading them to pull this retarded stunt on their own consumer base, causing consumer confidence in their product to completely vanish, ending with the whole house of cards collapsing? It's entirely possible, but without detailed information about the various mergers and acquisitions, we can't be sure. What we do know is that individual on-the-ground game developers don't trust Unity anymore. Publishers don't trust Unity anymore. Gamers don't trust Unity anymore. No one trusts Unity anymore. Trust is hard to earn and easy to lose, and Unity burned over a decade of trust in one swift, stupid move. Many game developers are pledging to move their games over from Unity if possible. Others are saying that their next titles won't use Unity. People are already beginning to make quick conversion tools for people moving their stuff from Unity to Unreal or whatever. People are asking if it's legal for Unity to simply unilaterally change the terms of service, and they're finding out that as long as there's enough time before changes are implemented, and as long as customers re-sign the deal, next time they boot up the application, companies that offer a service can change that service as they see fit. They're not bound to do the exact same thing in perpetuity just because you want them to.
This next question is one I have been wondering and I don't know anything about. And they were wondering if it's legal to change the terms of service overnight. And I don't know if it was necessarily overnight, but do you know, I don't know anything about the legal side of this stuff. All I've heard is random speculation from people who are also not lawyers.
Well, I think at sort of one level, all companies change their terms over time, frequently and constantly and consistently, because frankly, the world changes. Gaming is a very dynamic world. The world we live in is dynamic, and there are obviously always new things that are being added or whatever. However, I want to back up from that and say, it kind of comes back to your trust point, which is, I think one thing that I heard a lot is people very, very deeply need to know what they're signing up for when they pick a version of Unity to build their game on, and that they can, be sure that they can continue to use that. And I think that feedback, and there's a lot of other things that come along with trust, so I just want to be clear, but that feedback is really, really, really super clear. And that's one reason why, and what I talked about today, we're going to make sure that you can do that.
The problem with this all is that it requires trust, the very thing that Unity has just torched. Customers need to trust that Unity is not Darth Vader, altering the deal on a whim in some unfair way. And that's out the window now. Witten did state in that interview that they haven't seen a significant drop in Unity developers.
Like, do you know that there's been a dip in users, or is that something that you have to wait a little while to see?
Listen, I see all of it on like any channel where we get feedback. Obviously, we see all of the feedback. I haven't seen anything in our like actual numbers that would show that. Not saying that means it's not happening. And I will just say that it's my job to make sure that we build the best product so that people don't want to do that and that they want to stay on Unity and build great games.
That might be true, but we probably won't know until their next quarterly report. Despite all the backlash and all the PR spin from Unity, they ultimately still aren't backing down. I don't even necessarily begrudge them for wanting to make a bit more money. They're not exactly making tons of it right now, though I do know where they probably could pull a few bucks.
We riffed, or essentially reduced, some job categories for a total of about 250. And of course, I feel deeply about every individual, so don't get me wrong. The story for one person is painful, so I want to be clear about whenever there's job losses.
And most Unity users do actually pay them nothing for the use of their product. But they bungled this so badly, it might actually mean the end of Unity. And that means I'm probably never getting Hollow Knight Silksong. God damn it. Alright guys, that about does it for me. I know I'm late to the Unity story. We talked about it on the Archcast like a month ago, for example. But my laziness, my prudence has paid off. If you want to hear more from me, Naomi and I recently recorded a vlog where we watched the classic film They Live in theaters. Click on the link on screen and I'll see you over there. Have a good one, guys. I love you.